reality
therapist perception.
Bachelorette.
Hello and welcome back to Reactivity TV. I'm Amy Alvaro and I'm a licensed therapist.
I am Chris. I'm not a licensed therapist, but I have a ton of opinions about this show and I want to talk about them. So here I am.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So much to unpack, particularly around the rose ceremony of this episode, where we are reacting to The Golden Bachelor, season 1, episode 7. But before we jump into all of our reactions from this very shocking episode, please be sure to hit that like button at the bottom of this video. And also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I know I say it every week, but it is such a small thing and it goes a really, really long way. And I do just want to thank all of you who subscribed last week. We appreciate you being here.
Yeah. And also please make sure to hit that bell icon so that you're alerted anytime we post new content to the channel. We had talked last time about how occasionally the lead will send the runner-up home third to spare them, the pain and heartbreak of having to go through the fantasy suites and going to meet his family. Do we think that might have happened here?
I honestly, I'm having such a hard time speculating because I'm in shock at what happened and in disbelief. So I feel like I need to sit with that question a little bit more. And maybe when we get to the elimination of the rose ceremony, we can talk about that more. Like I'm still in my feelings about what we watched.
Yeah. Well, we did get a really interesting piece of information this week. And that was, we did find out for the behind the scenes what the order of the actual hometowns was. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Teresa was actually last and Faith was first. So when Faith, Leslie, Teresa, which of course brings back the what we were talking about last time, where Gerry and Faith had that really like strong, intimate moment in front of the entire family. And we were both like, wow, okay, that felt real and genuine. And then we walk into sort of the unforced era with Leslie. And we're like, why would you do that? And I'd hypothesized, I'm not sure if it made it into the final cut or if it edited for time, but I'd hypothesized last week that perhaps the genuineness of the Faith one happened and either he realized that he had screwed up and he had to sort of even the playing field, or production was in his ear being like, you got to do something to bring suspense still to the show. And when I heard that information, I thought that validated that theory. And I was actually prepared to come on here and gloat. And I just assumed that he just didn't feel it for Teresa. And that's why he just had said it to her family, but not to her. And then the rose ceremony happened and all my, I was like a deep fluff balloon.
Yeah, I was humbled. I really questioned myself, questioned what we've been watching. I mean, it really goes to show the danger of having a strong bias, because it does mean that you might kind of sift out like really important and meaningful pieces of information.
One other thing happened that you commented on this week that I thought was interesting, because me being new to the franchise, you had said it really seems like Gerry is getting out there really early. And I really don't understand like what he's doing. Why is he out so early?
Gerry was all over this week, interview after interview after interview.
Notice where he wasn't. Gerry, I'm ashamed of you. We got room. We got space for you right in between, right here.
But yeah, he was going on his what seems like in some ways like a damage control tour, because the timing felt weird. Like usually we see the Bachelor, Bachelorette kind of go on kind of like their interview tour early on in the season, of course, like after the final rose. But when they come out at like a midpoint in the season, it's usually to do maybe some sort of damage control. And so I'm now in retrospect, I think it makes sense. We weren't the only two shocked by the outcome of the rose ceremony.
Yeah.
So it makes sense in context now, for sure.
Yeah, especially with all the I love yous in the previous week.
Yeah. But one thing I do want to say, and this, like we did get some comments on this in terms of us being down on Gerry. I want to just reiterate, I love Gerry. I think Gerry is great. And that doesn't mean that I can't also not like some of his decision-making.
So in this episode, it was the infamous Women Tell All. Being my first experience with the Women Tell All, I really didn't know what to expect, but I was expecting, like, I mean, just the name alone says juicy, hot goss, spill the tea, right? Am I missing any other phrases that the kids use? So I got to be honest, I felt misled. I felt like when you get to 20-year-olds, I bet this is a really, really exciting episode.
Well, okay, so we're missing a really key factor, a really key variable here, which is that the reason that men tell all and women tell alls are really entertaining is because they serve as an interview audition for Bachelor in Paradise. And so that's why we often see these night oneers make a big splash at Women Tell All or Men Tell All in order to kind of get some screen time or get some, I don't know, fan base behind them in order to catapult them into Bachelor in Paradise.
Yeah, maybe push him to Paradise, get a good edit there, and then push him to Bachelorette. All right, well, that makes a little bit more sense because I'll be honest, and we might get some unsubs for this. This was the worst episode of the season. I thought it was extremely boring. It was overly produced, overly scripted, and exceptionally contrived. I hated pretty much every moment of it except for the actual rose ceremony spot. It was just a miss for me everywhere. That not meaning that there weren't, let me rephrase, outside of the actual like rose ceremony stuff, there was about 3 minutes worth of this episode that I was interested in, and the rest I was just waiting for Paradise to come on. So where does it rank up for you in terms of all of these that you've seen?
So women and men tell-alls are not my favorite episodes of the season. I much prefer like an after the final rose, because you're really usually at that point dealing with the lead and their winner and the runner-up. And so I find that those hot seat conversations are much more interesting. But I'm in the minority. People usually love the women and men tell all because there is usually a lot of drama or something that goes on. But anyway, so usually for a women tell all, I'm like fast forwarding through. But I wouldn't say I hated this episode. Was it my least favorite? Yeah, because I just enjoy the regular format of the show. But I really, really like this season. I really, really like this show, and I really, really liked the cast. And so getting a little bit more time with these women who I've really grown to care about and root for was nice.
So of these women, if the purpose of this is really to propel yourself to, to be the next Bachelor or Bachelorette, or to kind of get yourself another look for some other opportunity, who succeeded for you tonight?
Like who won the week in that sense?
Who won the week?
Okay, so I think that Susan has, I mean, we know.
Clear victor, yeah.
We know Chris loves Susan. So Susan is a star. I mean, she just is awesome. I mean, that they had Kris Jenner.
Oh, that's who that was.
Are you serious?
I don't know who anyone is. I know Bruce Willis, and that's about it. And George Clooney. I know those two people.
So I loved that she was kind of spotlit as the house mom. She just seemed so fun. And again, Kris Jenner cameo for Susan was great. I mean, that comparison that Susan looks like Kris Jenner has been kind of going off since the cast got revealed. So I think she won the week in terms of continuing to gain more and more popularity in the franchise. Did any of them get like a good Golden Bachelorette edit? I could see them like Ellen. I think usually a person in the hot seat that's their interview for potential Bachelor, Bachelorette. And so I do think the people that ended up in the hot seat, Faith, Joan, and Ellen, are all great candidates for Golden Bachelorette. If we do end up getting that, I can't see how we wouldn't get that. We do want that, right? I just want to make sure.
We got 3 hot seats.
Well, before we get into the hot seat, one thing that I did love that they did is they really did emphasize how historic this show was in the sense of, again, the portrayal of what aging looks like. I know, a few episodes back, I got really emotional thinking about that. And I just do want to spend some time here, even if just a little, just highlighting the hopefulness that the show gave to them, to these women, in terms of like, life is not over after a certain age. Joan hit on that at a certain point. Like, we are taught implicitly that like our time is up at a certain point in life, and then it's our responsibility to raise the next generation. And I really appreciate a show like this in, again, letting everyone know that life is not over at a certain age, and that people continue to deserve to want and desire and need love and companionship and friendship. And like a reason to live their life. And I loved that so much.
So it's interesting you bring it up because I had a different take on it. And maybe it's just me, but I'm a little bit of a been there, done that. Can we get a new narrative going on? And this is what I talk about with this format is it just felt so scripted and contrived. Like even Gary's speech, when he came out and he did basically the whole speech about exactly what you were just talking about. And it's just like, we've had 6 episodes of this. We get it. It's important, mention it and move on, but just continuing to just sit there and focus on it over and over and over. And I'm not the target demographic, so I accept that I'm not the target demographic. But I'm just the point of at this point, like I get it. Let's move on to some more. Just give me a different narrative. You can incorporate this, but like, can we add something around it with it at this point?
So I do hear what you're saying in terms of the narrative, but what I do want to hit on is the developmental appropriateness of them continuing to have this conversation. And this is very, very fresh on my mind because many of you may not know this, but I also teach a social work class on a master's level, and I'm teaching human behavior and the social environment to social work students. And the thing that we just talked about this week are Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages of development. And the final stage of development is referred to as ego integrity versus despair. And what this stage of development is really about is for people who are later in life, really reflecting on and evaluating their life and thinking about if they have essentially achieved their goals and experienced happiness. And for those people that like when they're reflecting back are kind of disappointed and filled with regret, that can lead to despair. But there is such a joy to be had when you reflect on your life and you recognize all of the milestones or all of the things that you did in your life, and that essentially the reason for living. And so it makes sense that these women and men in their 60s and 70s are really, really focused on that, because that is developmentally where they all are at, is in evaluating their life. And I think for some of them, coming on this show was an opportunity for them to be reminded of that. Like, I still have more life left to live. There are still more things for me to be proud of, more things for me to achieve. And I think for a lot of them, it was kind of like a now or never kind of idea that if I don't do this, I might be filled with regret or despair. And so again, I just want to, while I understand what you're saying as a 40-year-old, for these people that are, again, later in life, like they're at like in the 4th quarter of life, as I've heard someone else refer to it, that of course that they would be really, really appreciating this experience. I just want to take a quick pause to tell you that Revive is hiring. In our Miami and Pittsburgh offices, we have full and part-time W-2 and 1099 clinician positions available, and this includes both postgraduate and associate level licenses, in addition to fully licensed clinicians. In our Connecticut offices, we have full-time, fully licensed W-2 clinician positions available, including clinical supervisor opportunities. If you are interested in working for a company that values community, work-life balance, and your personal and professional growth, then we want to meet you. Find a link to our website in our bio. All right, let's move into the hot seats. Our first hot seat was from Joan, and we get reminded of Joan's journey and when she cut her own journey short.
Which I think was, for both of us, I mean, probably one of our top moments of the season for what there was to talk about and the feelings it brought up and stuff like that. Whether good or bad, hang on, and we'll talk about that in a future episode. But yeah, so it was really nice to revisit that because it really was one of the most impactful events, I think, of the entire season.
Agreed. I mean, that was the episode that I was
sobbing.
Yeah, crying in when we were recording. So for sure. And we got a little bit more context about Joan and her leaving, and that her daughter at the time of recording the show had just given birth 15 days prior and was experiencing a pretty serious case of postpartum depression, which is very, very serious. And so it makes a lot of sense that Joan would want to be there for her daughter and her grandchild as well.
So I do have a question about this. Postpartum depression is one of those things that it's a term, it's used all the time. But to be perfectly frank and honest, if you ask me to actually define it, I don't think I could give a competent definition. To me, it's just like, oh, it's a sadness you feel after giving birth. But like for someone like me who legitimately does not actually understand what it is, can you just give me like a brief definition?
So what you are describing is more commonly referred to as like the baby blues, which is a more mild response to childbirth. It is relatively common that after giving birth, in the mix of feeling excitement and joy, you might also feel some fear and also some sadness, and that makes a lot of sense given like the massive shift in hormones that you've just experienced. What postpartum depression is on a much more severe and significant level than that, and is much more intense than kind of the baby blues. And it can be, I mean, there's so many symptoms for PPD, but in addition to depressed mood, it can result in difficulty bonding with your baby, could result in insomnia. For some people, can include psychosis. Often suicide ideation is a part of PPD, not always, but it can be. Irritability. So they are symptoms that are in a lot of ways, of course, very consistent with depression as we know it, but really, really impact a mother's ability to perform the tasks that are needed and required in order to parent their child and bond with their baby. And again, it's quite severe. It's more common than we think it is. And there's not a lot of research or support around PPD. And so there is a completed suicide aspect of PPD if not treated. Not always, but can happen. And several people within our community have died by suicide who have experienced PPD. And so it is something that's really, really serious. And if a mom, a new mother is experiencing those like baby blues symptoms for longer than a couple of days or like getting into weeks, really, really important that they let their doctor know in order for them to be monitored and get support that they need. This is such a disenfranchised population. And again, new moms really, really need support around this.
Do we know if it's more chemical based from the change in hormones, or like, do we know what actually causes it? I guess is the question.
I'm not an expert in PPD. I can definitely drop some resources in our show notes about that are more well informed on this topic than I am, and I think just from what I understand of it, it could be a mix of a lot of things. There could be a predisposition to PPD. A lot of women that already struggle with depression or anxiety prior to being pregnant or giving birth may be more susceptible to PPD. But for some women, the shift in hormones alone is enough to significantly impact mood. But again, I'll emphasize that this is not my area of expertise or specialty. So I'll drop some info in our show notes.
Okay, so then let's talk about you know Joan's sort of journey and her take on everything. I had said at, I don't know what episode that was, perhaps it was episode 3, that I thought Joan was pretty boring and I was expecting to go home. She then, the next episode, turns out to be one of my favorite characters in the entire show. Couldn't believe the turnaround. Once she was finally on screen, I just found her to be really lovely, really genuine. One of the most beautiful in a group of very beautiful women, in my opinion. And I thought that showed through in her what do we call this? Hot seat, FaceTime, face to camera, whatever it is, interview. I guess we'll go with. So I enjoyed having her talk. She didn't really, I don't think, illuminate us with any new real details at all. It was basically just a rehashing of what we'd already seen. So no new information, but it was nice to see her. It was nice to see that things are going better for her and her family. But beyond that, I didn't think that there was anything really new, but you let me know.
No, I'm with you. It was, again, nice to see her again. I know like America is really rallying around Joan, and I think there are a lot of people that would love to see Joan as the Golden Bachelorette. So I'm not sure if we'll get that or not. And she did say that there was a part of her that wished that, she would just come home one day and Gerry would be sitting on her front porch. And you know what? There was a part of me that really wanted that to happen as well, especially during that episode when she had sent herself home. And me thinking that like, wow, maybe there's still hope here. But regardless of Gerry and Joan not working out, it seems like, again, her installation of hope was reignited again. And I have hope for her that she will find love again. The second person we had in the hot seat was Ellen. And again, not surprising. I'm an America's favorite. Not maybe you weren't as much of a fan of Ellen as I was, and as like
she was fine.
So many people were. But it was really nice to have Ellen down in the hot seat. What I couldn't stop focusing on was how pretty her hair was. It was so pretty and silky. And so I don't know, Ellen, I would love to know what your hair routine looks like. It looked really pretty.
I'll be honest, I did not notice that at all.
But we do hear from her in terms of talking about her journey on the show, as well as her 60-year friendship with Roberta, her friend who this season has been dedicated to, who died prior to the showing of the season.
All right, so I have a bit of an admission. What do we call this? A confession. Okay. Her hot seat interview was beautiful. It was touching. I typically don't get, we'll say misty eyed or anything like that. But, while she was doing her interview, we were not watching it together. You were teaching your class at the time. And so I was watching, trying to get ahead. I was thinking I might actually need to reach for the napkin, because I was getting a little emotional in her description of everything. But I'm going to be honest. When I talked earlier about the overproduction, the over contrivances, and just the kind of the scripted nature of it, when they brought out Roberta's daughter, that killed it for me. And this is one of the issues I sort of have with this particular format was production nailed it. Ellen, she had real emotion. It was raw. She was saying some really emotional things. I don't tend to get particularly emotional. And even I was like, wow, that was really, really impactful. And then they dragged out Roberta's daughter, and it was just felt scripted. It was like stiff. Production, you nailed it. Stop while you're ahead. And this is what it just all just felt so contrived. And it was a bit of an eye roll for me. And it was like, you should have stopped while you were ahead. This is what it is. Okay. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is one of those times that I love you, but I don't like you.
It felt exploitative. Like, I don't know why the daughter was there. It felt like production said, we want to have a moment here with the daughter and Ellen, and we want the daughter to deliver this really impactful, emotional speech. The problem is the daughter is not an actress, right? She can't deliver that speech. So she has this scripted speech that she's trying to deliver in emotional fashion in front of millions of viewers. She can't execute it, and it just feels so contrived. It feels like the writers and the producers were so desperate to try and make a moment happen that wasn't going to happen, because that's a moment that belongs behind closed doors, not in front of America. And that's just what it felt like to me. Ellen has the personality to deliver that type of thing in front of America, and the producers and the writers should have just stopped there, because it was perfect. It didn't need that extra push, and that extra push just ruined it for me.
I think you're broken inside. As Ellen was talking, they kept panning to this woman who we now know is Courtney, Roberta's daughter. And we could see Courtney reacting to what Ellen was saying and getting tearful, and that and putting together who she was, like that really, really touched my heart. And yeah, was her speech a little bit rehearsed? Sure. But how much Roberta wanted to be a part of this experience, or Ellen wanted Roberta to be a part of this experience, how meaningful it is that part of Roberta could be in her daughter. Like, I'm getting tearful.
Let me ask you a question. What was added? Everything you just said, sure, I agree. I agree with all of that. But all of that was executed in the interview with Ellen. What got added by Courtney's presence?
I don't know that it was for us. I think it was for Ellen.
Well, if it was for Ellen, the writers don't care about Ellen. The producers don't care about Ellen or Gerry or Courtney or Roberta. They care about ratings. Let's be honest, people here, right? It was for us because they thought that would juice ratings in future seasons. That's what it was for. So like, no, that's a beautiful scene that can happen. I mean, I'm sure Courtney knows how to get in touch with Ellen.
Yeah, I know. And Ellen did say that, she shared parts of the season with Courtney. But listen, I think you're being a little too harsh. I think like your inner Grinch is coming out
On production,
on production, on Courtney, on the writers. I mean, I'm saying this. I have no idea what the reactions to this have been. I've not gone on social media yet. I've not listened to any podcasts about it. So I don't know what the reaction is. I can understand what you were saying in that we didn't necessarily need it, but I don't think that it took away. I think in so many ways, what Courtney said to her was powerful. She said, you are an example of true friendship, of what love and loyalty looked like. And yeah, that is true. And who better knows that than Courtney, right? And she told her that she deserved love, which is what Ellen needed to hear. That was her whole thing about this throughout this season, was her worthiness. And that was her big takeaway from the season. The first thing she said was, I have gratitude for Gerry for helping me to know that I'm worthy. That's all she really needed to hear. And so having Courtney double down on that as someone that she actually knows and cares about her and has known throughout her whole life is meaningful. So I disagree with you, but I welcome your opinion. Please let us know.
Comment section. This is another one of these. One of us is right and one of us is clearly wrong. And so I expect a lot of comments. Capital C's for Chris, capital A's for Amy.
Yes. Sound off, please.
America, if you haven't figured it out yet, I really, really hate contrivances.
Okay, so let's go to what seemed to be the least contrived and the most raw and emotional moment on reality TV I've ever seen, which was the rose ceremony. So we leave Ellen. They kind of give us some levity with bloopers. Fine. Then we go back to the mansion and see the conclusion of the rose ceremony. And it was at this moment when they're doing the voiceover and we hear Faith talking about how devastating it would be to not get picked, that I was like, oh, damn, it's Faith.
I feel like as the episode was moving along, I feel like I knew more and more it was going to be Teresa, because they were setting us up for Faith getting sent home, and just really, really kind of juicing that narrative. I was shocked. I really, really was shocked because Faith seemed like the right pick.
I do want to go to their goodbye though, and the ending of their relationship
at the rose ceremony, or
both.
Okay,
yeah. And so, what did you think of that, of their goodbye?
Well, she had described the end of the rose ceremony when he walks her out. I don't. One thing I noticed, he walks a lot of women out. Is that common? No. He walks more out than average.
Gerry has been more intentional about walking people out than previous, but at this stage of the game, when you're only eliminating like one person, or there's like one, like walking Ellen out a couple of weeks ago, like it makes sense that he would do that when again there is like a strong connection there, or in this case, like you can't not walk Faith out.
Well, I mean, she had described it during the hot seat interview that she was basically numb and couldn't even really digest what was happening or the words. I thought he said mostly the right things. I didn't really see a lot that was necessarily wrong. But I do think that he was so emotional, she was so numb, that it was really hard to sort of like really glean a lot out of there, because it was just such sort of like a shock. I think I was still in shock. So I feel like I might have missed half of what he had said just because I was in such shock. So yeah, it was an interesting moment. But yeah, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I do think hearing her say like the shock was, you could see it on her face, especially in her limo exit too. You could just kind of see it, kind of the disbelief. And she referenced that a little bit in when she was at the Women Tell All, and just saying, going from being so connected to just disconnection like that, that was kind of devastating. I thought her watching her goodbye and cry. I mean, that, oh my gosh, gutted me. And when they embraced on the stage and they were both like, I'm getting like tearful thinking about it, like them embracing and sobbing, saying like just in greeting was so just heart wrenching. Because it's so clear that Faith really did care so much about him. I do think it was almost as though Gerry had to face the consequence of his actions by making these, what did I say? These grand promises to Faith and to her family. And saying I love you is also a promise. And to completely rip the rug out from under Faith, she was blindsided. And as were we. And production did a great job in the edit in again making us believe on some level that the connection was greater than it was. But Faith also seemed to believe that too, based on Gerry's words and actions. And so I could understand like her still being in shock and disbelief about what happened. Gerry was very purposeful in saying, I did have love for you in those moments. And I thought that that was a really different recreation of history. And maybe in retrospect, especially with whoever he's with now, I'm assuming he's with someone, that is those are the right words to say to justify his actions. But that felt so invalidating to Faith's experience and what they expressed to one another.
Well, I completely agree. But one thing that I did give him a lot of credit for, and I'm sure it was noteworthy to you as well, was that, and I wrote it down. I promised your family something, and I broke that promise. That was maybe my favorite moment of the entire episode, because it validated everything. All you people in the comments, all you people that gave us a thumbs down, it validated everything that we would been saying. And our core criticism of Gerry was that he keeps making these grandiose promises, and they're mutually exclusive. Will have to break most, if not all of them necessarily, but he will have to break most of these promises. And he's writing checks that he cannot cash. And for him to get up on that stage and admit that, and didn't have to be coerced into it, didn't have to be poked to get there. He came right out and admitted it. And I thought that was an important moment for him, probably an important moment for Faith. I thought Faith let him off the hook a little bit, saying, "Oh, my family doesn't think that." Well, maybe or maybe not, but he still did it. He's still guilty. Whether or not you want to hold his feet to the fire is it's a different conversation. But don't let him off the hook. As well. But I give him a lot of credit for acknowledging it, admitting it. And I almost wonder, was this part of his damage control tour in some ways?
Yeah, it's possible. And with Faith, I think that again, she was really devastated. She talked about how hard and long how hard it is and how long it takes her to let her walls down. And she did that for Gerry. And I think she was misled. Like, I think that she was misled into a sense of safety to do that. And I know that like often the criticism of this show and these women having strong reactions is they know what they signed up for. And I know that that was also part of our comments from last week. And while they signed up for a show where it's a competition and they know that they might not get chosen, the feelings are still real. And they might not know how intensely they're going to feel about someone until you actually get there. And so while yes, she did sign up for this, she probably didn't realize just how gut-wrenching it would be or how deeply she would fall for Gerry. So I have a lot of empathy for Faith, and I feel frustrated on her behalf that again she was like falsely lured into a sense of safety in order to again take her walls down, which she did end up saying. And it was very clearly like an edit at one point, because it seemed like she was like holding Gerry's feet to the fire in continuing to say, like, talk about how hard this was for her. And then eventually it kind of shifted into, now I know my walls can come down, and I didn't realize that it would feel good or feel this way. And so it kind of got turned. But anyway, I'm wishing Faith the best. You are still my number one girl, Faith. And I just appreciated her vulnerability throughout this entire season. And for me, that was the strength that I was really here to see. Well, let's shift into our rose and thorn of the week.
We didn't talk about the blooper reel. That's my thorn. Blooper reels are fine. I think like slapstick comedy is the lowest form of comedy, and blooper reels tend to sort of be in that same vicinity. And they just don't do it for me. Also, we basically just got a bunch of 60-year-old women burping and farting, which is like weird because like that's such 12-year-old boy humor. And this is an audience that's predominantly female. And so it just didn't feel like that really aligned that much, but maybe it's because I don't know. I just didn't get it. Wasn't for me. I thought the whole blooper reel from start to finish was pretty bad. I'm going to give a specific point though, on, did you see the women roughhousing and throwing them each other in the pool? Ladies, this is like Gerry jumping on the bed. You're 60. Stop throwing each other around. You're not 15-year-old boys on the football field. You're going to break something and it's important. Cut that out.
Wait, you know what's funny that you mentioned the Gerry jumping on the bed? When they were doing like Joan's flashback of her journey, they had, Gerry saying that part of, I'm so disappointed because when I woke up this morning, yada yada. I watch everything with the subtitles on, so I know for a fact that when we listened to it the first time, the subtitles had it as I was jumping on the bed. But this time, I don't know if you caught it, it said I was jumping out of bed. So he wasn't jumping on the bed apparently. And it makes much more sense that he'd be jumping out of bed than on the bed. So thank you for the clarification to the subtitles.
Feet on the ground, Gerry, feet on the ground. Okay. So my thorn was like the whole blooper reel. I didn't like any of it, but specifically, ladies, please don't throw each other in the pool. You're 60 plus years old. Like nobody wants you guys to get hurt.
You are ageist right now. We're just talking about how this show is talking about how youthful and how vivacious 60 and young 70 could be.
Okay. Father Time is undefeated. Okay. That's what I have to say. Father Time is undefeated. I like most of these women tremendously, right? I do not want to see any of them, breaking a hip.
So my thorn this week, other than you, apparently, is this happens on every Women Tell All, Men Tell All, is that the cast will like refer or like revere the lead as like some amazing god. It's like, thank you, Gerry, for this, and thank you for this. And it's like he's on this high pedestal, again, as though he's this huge godlike figure. And it's, again, not unique to Gerry. This happens every season, that they idealize the lead and make them into this big superhero. He's just a man. He did a good job as a lead. I'm glad you got something from this journey. Ladies, do not take it away from yourself and what you contributed to this journey. Gerry was not responsible for that. You were. You own it. You do not need to thank Gerry for this. I'm glad he helped build your sense of confidence and self-worth, but you can take responsibility for that too. You did it. You do not need to give the credit to Gerry completely in the way that you did. So again, not specific to Gerry. This happens every season and it always bothers me.
Yeah, no,
it's very disempowering. My rose this week goes to Jesse Palmer. I thought that he did a fantastic job as a host. I felt like he, again, has really, really grown into his role. He did such a good job. I felt like he was really real. I think he did a great job with the interviews. He just felt like such a real person. I loved seeing him get vulnerable as well and a little emotional. So we don't often reference Jesse on the show, but I feel like he did a really, really fantastic job. And I want to make sure that I highlight that. A rose petal, I want to give to Teresa's dress in the rose ceremony. It's something that I don't think I touched on last episode, but her dress was beautiful. The green satin dress was really, really pretty. And I noticed it last week and again this week. And so also just want to shout out Teresa for the dress choice.
See, I was a big fan of Leslie's dress.
Of course you were.
What is that supposed to mean?
She's doing a little too much there for me.
Really? Wait. But on Paradise, you were a big fan of Mercedes' dress.
Mercedes' dress was more tasteful than Leslie's dress, in my opinion.
Think so?
1,000%.
That's not how percentages work.
1,001.
That's even worse. Yeah, by 1%. Yeah. Do you know what I just saw this week?
What?
You had once told me that Jesse Palmer was a former Bachelor. And I was like just trying to research for the show and figure out what I don't know and stuff like that. And he once called the wrong girl's name. Yes. He literally was up there. First of all, I didn't even recognize him.
It's like in Bachelor canon.
Oh, I mean, I didn't even recognize him at first. Like it said Jesse Palmer, and I'm like, who's this guy? I mean, it's been what, 15 years or whatever. He was like a young kid, you know. But yeah, he legitimately called the wrong girl's name, and this was back when
Chris Harrison.
Chris Harrison was the host. He calls Chris Harrison over and is like, Chris, called the wrong name, man. Like, can I get another rose? And what I thought was amazing was that he actually got another rose and then told the girl that he accidentally gave the rose to that it was an accident, and then gave her the option to stay. Jesse, man, just saying, you could have just asked for another rose and left it alone. I mean, I don't know what that girl, how she felt after, if there was ever commentary about that, but that was, I feel like that was, I was entertained by that entire little skit. But apparently all the roses have their names written on it now, and it's a direct result of Jesse Palmer.
Yes. So that's what got your rose this week?
No, actually my rose is going to the person in production who writes the names on the roses, so that this type of thing doesn't happen again. Because that girl had to feel like shit. Like, even her, she's like, I guess I'm staying. Like, I guess I know I'm going home next time, but whatever. And she was so excited. I was like heartbroken for her. She was so excited. You thought you were never going to call my name. Like,
I love how Chris hated this episode so much that his rose wasn't even from this, not only not this episode, but not this season, seasons and seasons and seasons ago. That's how much he hated the women tell all.
Wait. No, my rose officially went to the person in production who puts the names on the roses, and that person clearly was doing the job this episode.
Yeah.
All right. And for all I know, it might be multiple people. I don't know. They might just sit down. It might be a team of people making sure they get the spelling right and everything like that. Now we know, are the names like written phonetically?
I don't know.
You know, because I mean, you know. Yeah.
So clearly Chris and I disagreed a lot this episode. We would love to know kind of where you fell between Chris and I this week. But thank you so much for being here, for following along with us, for your likes, your ratings, reviews, subscribes, your comments. We love to see them. Make sure to check out the B-side of our Reactivity TV, where we'll be talking about Bachelor in Paradise, season 9, episode 7, which is chock.
Strap in for that one. That one's going to be a long episode. Oof.
But we will see you next week with another Reactivity TV on the Golden Bachelor. So we'll see you then. If you want to check out our other podcast, Wishing You Well, which is all about helping you navigate your wellness journey, be sure to subscribe to that podcast on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. We'll also drop the links to that in our show notes. You can also follow along with us on Instagram at ReviveCFW. Check out our website, revivecfw.com. And you can follow along with me at Amy Albero, LCSW. We will see you soon. Bye.
Can I take you to the fantasy suite now?
Bye.